Good morning, I'm Waywornwyrm, and welcome to my channel. And welcome to the first episode of the Star Trek Adventures, the original series, Living Campaign. We're starting with Episode 1, Adrift. Captain's Log, Stardate 5428.3. The ship is on course to Dourap IV, near the Klingon border. Velkath, the Tellarite colony there, has had an outbreak of Dourap fever, a highly contagious viral infection. The disease is still in its early phases, no fatalities have been reported. We've been tasked by Starbase 24 to transport an emergency medical team and their supplies to the colony and provide any assistance they might need. We are traveling at warp factor 6. Our ETA is approximately 18 hours. This will be the Lexington's first mission since the disaster that was the M5 drill. The ship went through a total refit and assigning of an entirely new crew. For obvious reasons, none of the ships involved in the M5 drill contributed to this new crew. First Officer and Chief Science Officer, Commander Ziv, was briefing the senior staff on Dourap fever. While this would normally be done by the Chief Medical Officer, Commander Miral, Helic was a Tellarite, so the job fell to him. Dourap fever is a contagious and dangerous disease on Tellar. Since it was carried by native insects, it is most likely on Tellar, but we have imported flora and fauna on a few of our older colonies, as most species have. It is a known danger on these colonies as well. It can also be transmitted from person to person in a manner similar to the influenza virus found on Earth. This particular outbreak seems to have arrived at the Velkath colony via a shipment of luxury goods that were not properly quarantined. Early stages of the disease are marked by a high fever and muscle weakness, again, similar to influenza. In fact, in its early stages, it's a very good mirror to influenza in its symptoms. The problem arises in the later stages of the disease, when it begins to attack the lungs. It compromises the ability to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide, which ends up suffocating the victim. Luckily, the disease is easily treatable with the drug Dourap, especially in the early stages. While this disease is primarily a threat to Tellarites, there are documented cases of the disease being transmitted to humans and Deltans. Vulcans and Andorians appear to be immune to the disease due to the different base metals found in their blood. It is unknown if most other species can get the disease or not, as the places most likely to have an outbreak are also the places most prepared to contain it before it gets out of hand. Captain Delvok absorbed the information in his normal, passive style. Thank you, Commander, for your medical briefing. Do you have a briefing on the planet and colony as well? Helic nodded. Yes, sir, I do. Velkath is a small, mostly agricultural colony on the smaller of the two northern continents on the planet Dourap IV. It was founded almost 12 years ago. In fact, it is so close to 12 years ago that the medical team will probably be around for the celebration, if not us as well. This was well before the current tensions with the Klingons. It has a population of approximately 18,000, with a makeup of roughly 93% Tellarite, with humans and Vulcans comprising essentially the entire rest of the population. As always, there are a few members of other species mixed in there, but they make up less than 0.1% of the population. Dourap IV is an M-class planet, slightly smaller than Earth. Roughly 68% of its surface is ocean. Most of the land mass of the planet consists of 5 continents, 2 mostly or completely in each hemisphere respectively, north and south, and one straddling the equator. It lacks indigenous sentient life forms, but there are extensive native flora and fauna, which is part of what attracted the settlers in the first place. Gravity and atmosphere are Earth normal. Thank you, Commander, Velkath said before swiveling to the display in the center of the table. Commander Miral, can you give a report on the medical team? Captain Miral's face appeared on the screen, looking a bit annoyed briefly. Yes, Captain. Out of deference to the wishes of the colonial administration, the medical team is comprised of civilians. There are 6 doctors, 10 nurses, and 10 orderlies. They will coordinate with local physicians, distribute Daronite as needed, and tend to isolated colonists in outlying areas. We are currently coordinating treatment plans between the ship's medical crew and them for when the Lexington reaches the planet. Thank you, Commander, was Velkath's reply before switching off the screens and looking up at the rest of the senior command of his ship. Now that we have been fully briefed, I suggest you return to your posts. We should be arriving in a bit under 18 hours. With that, the command staff left the room, and all headed to the bridge to retake their positions. The way the duty shifts worked out, they would be arriving to the planet near the start of their next duty shift. As everyone was settling back into their normal routine, klaxons began to blare, the ship lurching violently from side to side. The normal star field in the forward viewer changed to a swirling tunnel of red-orange bands of energy. "We're in a wormhole!" someone shouted on the bridge, needlessly pointing out how wrong things had gone. Lieutenant Commander Melissa Nicholas was on it, though, her hands almost dancing over the helm, trying to get the ship back under control. After a few seconds, the ship's lurching slowed to just vibrations, and the ship fully stabilized soon after. Captain, navigation and engine controls aren't responding. I can't take us out of warp. Velkath's glaze shot over to the Arbanazin chief engineer, Lieutenant Commander Tuvmil. On it, came the terse reply, as he was already starting to work on the ship. The ship's fighting me, Captain, and there, that should do it, he said after a short fight with the controls. As the warp drive was taken offline, the collapse of the warp field began to slow the ship back to light speed. Melissa, knowing how serious the situation was, attempted to put the impulse engines in full reverse. Sir, the impulse engines are not responding. Confirmed, Captain. Impulse engines are not responding, Tuvmil said as the ship entered sublight speed. Damage report. Propulsion systems are all offline, as are guidance systems, Melissa reported. Subspace communications are out, came the report from Lieutenant Commander Priapus Irwin, the ship's communications officer. Weapon systems are down, shields are functional, but only at about 67%, Lieutenant Commander Suman Abanov, the chief of security, reported. A large portion of the engineering hull is without lights or power due to an overload, but life support seems to be unscathed, reported Tuvmil. Helic was the last to report from the bridge. Ship's sensors are also unaffected. Miral was the last of the senior staff to report. We have numerous casualties, Captain. Thankfully, they all appear to be light. Mostly bumps and bruises. One crewman was thrown across a corridor and broke their wrist, but so far, that's the most serious casualty that has been reported. Helic looked up from his console as Miral was finishing her report. More bad news, Captain. In all that bouncing around that we did, we have turned almost 90 degrees in the wrong direction. We are currently traveling at warp 0.9, straight toward the Klingon border. Put it on the main screen now, Velkath replied in his normal even tone. He studied the map for a minute as it was placed on the screen. We appear to be closer to the border than prudent. Lieutenant Commander Nicholas, how long until we cross border at current speed? A little under 3 hours, sir. That does not leave us with much time. Commander Javziv, We have heard the damage report of what happened from the wormhole, but what caused the wormhole? On it, sir, came the reply. The bridge was a tense but silent place for the next several minutes as Helk pored over sensor logs. Finally, he looked it up and gave his report. The wormhole was caused by a warp field imbalance. Are you positive? Yes, sir. There was a warp field imbalance which caused the wormhole. Lieutenant Commander Tuvmill. What caused a warp field imbalance? Velkath continued in the logical process of fixing his ship. First, they needed to know what happened to make sure it wouldn't happen again. Give me a few minutes, sir. I should be able to figure out what happened, now that I know what to look for. The bridge fell silent again as Tuvmill started his search of the cause of the imbalance. Okay, sir. The field imbalance was caused by a damaged plasma reactor halfway up the starboard nacelle pylon. The plasma injector needs to be replaced. I need to shut down the warp core, then we'll need to wait for the system to cool, and then once it is cool, I can replace the injector assembly. Priapus spoke up at this point. It appears that the actuators on the chamber's coil within the main subspace transceiver array have been burnt out, but the coil itself is reading as still undamaged. I'll go get to work on replacing them. Priapus's words seemed to open a floodgate of people figuring out what needed to be fixed and starting to fix it. Sumaun was the next to speak. Several field emitters were knocked out of alignment by the power overload. I'll work on realigning them to get our shields back up to full power. I'm going to start repairing or replacing engine control relays to restore power to our impulse engines and maneuvering thrusters, Melissa reported. Within a minute, the bridge was almost empty, with just Velkath sitting at his command chair and Helk standing by his station. Well, Captain, it looks like repairs are well underway. Yes, it does appear so, Velkath said while continuing to watch the map of the Klingon border and the ever-shrinking distance between the Lexington and the red line representing the border. I need you to keep watch at the sensors. We're on a non-functioning Federation starship, heading toward an empire we've never been on good terms with, and are on quite poor terms with at this moment. Helk nodded and started scanning the sensor readings, preparing for anything. The Tellarite science officer and the Vulcan captain sat in silence for several minutes, each concentrating on different things, until the intercom whistled to life. Captain, Tuvmill began. The warp core is offline, and the nacelles are cooling now. They should be cool enough to begin work on them in about an hour. Good, Velkath answered before looking at something next to him. You had reported that this would take 10 minutes, but you appear to have done it in 5. Is there any way to cut down on the cooling time? Negative, Captain. We were able to cut the time in half by shutting down the warp core, by cutting some corners and doing some things that I would not be comfortable doing normally. But this is a bit of a crisis, and I also know that the cooling could not be sped up. We are waiting for entropy to take its course. The ship is very well designed to help entropy along when needed, but it is all down to nature. Very well. What will you do while waiting for it to cool? I should just have enough time to fix the power system overload. It looks like the plasma injector was damaged by that overload, which also seems to have disabled the safety interlocks, which would normally have taken us out of warp when the computer first detected the problem. Okay, Lieutenant Commander. As you mentioned, this could be considered a crisis, and time is of the essence. 25 minutes later, the intercom whistled again. This time, it was Sumaun. Captain, the field emitters have been realigned. Shields are back to full strength. Velkath responded as neutrally as always. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. I suggest you work on getting our weapons back online next. Aye, aye, Captain. That was my plan. I should only have to restart them and then recalibrate them. After the connection was severed, Helk looked over to his new captain. You know, sir, such an even tone is apt to irritate some people. Velkath swiveled to face Helk, cocking an eyebrow. Is that right, Commander? Yes, sir. With a tense situation like this, most species' emotions start running high, and generally speaking, when they are met with such a calm, even tone, it gets aggravating. Some may even accuse you of not being fully aware of the situation without emotions being displayed. Thank you, Commander, but I disagree. Emotion in a crisis only makes things worse. It makes people more likely to forget something or overlook something. Not only that, but in situations where life support is something to worry about, heightened emotions tend to lead to hyperventilating, which uses up precious supplies in a much faster rate. In a logical and detached way, everything you just said is true, but asking people to not feel emotions in a time such as this is like going up to a star and asking it not to shine today, or for gravity to just take a day off. Those things are quite impossible, Commander. That was exactly my point, sir. Velkath did not respond to Hellick's last remark, and the bridge lapsed into silence once more. Velkath was quite comfortable with the silence, and Hellick was focused on the sensor readings to the point where he did not notice the silence other than for the fact that nothing was interrupting him. At 2 hours left before crossing the Klingon border, Velkath received a notification that the weapons were back online. The weapons are back, he said, mostly to Hellick. Good. Suman must be starting to recalibrate them now. If I remember correctly from what they have said in the past about weapons calibration, they should be finishing up right around the time that the nacelle pylon is cool enough for Tuvmil to begin his work. We might actually get everything back and going before we cross the border. The power returned to the ship at 1 hour, 50 minutes until crossing the border. This was relayed by a member of the engineering crew. Tuvmil was too busy getting back to the pylons, which finished their cooling 10 minutes later. At 1 hour and 45 minutes to the crossing, the intercom whistle is heard once more. Melissa's aggravated voice comes over the bridge. Captain, we have some problems with these engine relays. A large set of them just blew again as I finished up and tested everything. We're looking at another hour for fixing this. That's cutting it close, Lieutenant Commander Nicholas. It is imperative that we get the impulse propulsion and maneuvering thrusters back online as soon as possible. If we don't get them back online in 1 hour and 45 minutes, it will most likely not matter how long it takes. We will have violated our treaty, and quite possibly started a war. I'm well aware of our time constraints, Captain, came the terse reply before the intercom was cut. Thank you so much for listening to the first episode of the Star Trek The Original Series Living Campaign, Adrift, Part 1. Tune in tomorrow for the start of another new series called Astra Imperia. And then next week, I am going to be starting the Star Trek Adventures The Next Generation Living Campaign. So tune in for that. And Adrift Part 2 will be up 2 weeks after this goes live. Thank you so much.